Welcome to Awkward Conversations. I'm your host, Jody Sweeten. I want to warn you up front, today's episode is profoundly emotional and incredibly difficult, and we are talking about a parent's worst nightmare, which is the loss of a child. We're speaking to a brave mom who's experienced the unimaginable and yet finds the strength to share her personal journey in hope of safeguarding other families from the tragic ripple effects of substance misuse. Today's story is real, raw, and heart-wrenching, and we are bringing it to you as a reminder that the danger of substance misuse is not hypothetical. It does not discriminate, and its consequences can be devastating. Please welcome Debbie Dinicenzo.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Debbie. Can you briefly share with us your personal journey and the story of Dana?
Dana was your everyday average child. She did cheerleading, she did softball for a while. She was just your average everyday child until about the age of 13. She started showing some signs of some acting out, to which at what point she was diagnosed with being bipolar. And I had found out at that time she was trying to self-medicate with marijuana. This started at age 13. So we were in and out of rehabs, programs, and she would do well for a couple years here and there, no problems. And in 2020, unfortunately, after she had been clean for 2.5 years, she had succumbed to fentanyl.
Yeah. I know that that is a story that we hear very often in the world of recovery and the world of substance abuse is, the struggle and the back and forth, and that oftentimes people relapse one more time, and that can be the final time. Thank you so much for allowing us to ask you questions about Dana and about her story so that other parents can be aware and ask the questions and show up for their children as well. And I would also like to introduce Joanna Anderko, who is Senior Prevention Program Manager and Community Outreach and Prevention Support Specialist, but who also happens to have been a childhood friend of Dana's. So thank you so much, Joanna, for joining us today as well.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Debbie, what were some early signs or behaviors that you noticed when Dana started self-medicating and struggling with her issues of the bipolar diagnosis? What were some of the things that you noticed?
New friends start not being where she would tell me she was going to be. I would have to pick her up somewhere else. She was secretive. A lot of times she wouldn't want me to know who it was that she was with, to the point where I wouldn't let her go anywhere unless I met who she was with. But then she would leave that crowd and go with another crowd. Very secretive. I guess that's a big thing that really turned me into, okay, something is going on here with Dana. School, she started acting out in school horrendously. Didn't want to listen to her teachers. Her grades were failing. Just hanging out with the new people, which was really, that was my first sign, was why are you hanging out with these people, when she used to hang out with people on the other side of town. And then it was a whole new group of people that I didn't even know. So that was a big thing for me. Secretive, like I said, she was very secretive. There was no cell phones at the time. Be getting phone calls. Right. They'll come up from out of town. So at that point, when I thought Dana was not involved in any of that, it was a real hard slap in my face that, oh my God, she's going down this road.
And one of the things you talk about is that Dana got very secretive. Did you notice Dana pulling away from you, and had you guys had a relationship and been close, and then it just started separating?
That is exactly what happened. We used to go out every Friday night, Dana and I. We would go to this place called the Rockaway Mall. We would go there, we would go shopping, stop at the diner, and it started to be, well, I don't want to go this weekend, Ma. And at first I said, okay, maybe she's like 13, maybe she doesn't want to hang out with Mom anymore.
Right.
But then you're right, she did. She started to pull away. She wasn't calling me at work as much as she used to, because she would call me at work sometimes too much. but that all stopped. I knew at some point what was going on.
Yeah. And we talk about that so often, that it's such a delicate balance that parents have to go through at that age, where we know that it's healthy and good that our kids are individuating and having their own lives, but when they start going in that wrong direction and being secretive and keeping those things from us, it becomes so terrifying. And Amy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. What are some of the ways that we can tell normal individuating behavior in adolescence and behavior that we should be concerned about?
Yeah, we talk a lot about in our program at Boston Children's Hospital about how limits are love. You know, your child is not developmentally programmed to want you to set rules and expectations, but also they need rules and expectations, right? And being able to set those kind of standards, is so important. I think Debbie's story, is one that talks to me or speaks to me about how the best way to prevent an overdose death, right, is to never start using substances in the first place. And so, that's so much about what our conversation is about today, that, on the other hand, a substance use disorder is a medical condition. It is something that I think, unfortunately, families feel a lot of shame and blame and stigma around. But just like, when people live with, chronic and terminal illnesses like cancer or other things of the sort, substance use disorders also sometimes, go beyond the threshold of being able to be treated. And it's tragic, and it's just so all encompassing.
I think also, as a parent to, I have 15 and almost 13-year-old girls, that balance is so difficult. And we talk about that a lot on this show, and acknowledging that even when you do all of the things that you're supposed to do, and you do all of the things right as a parent, that ultimately there is choices that your children will make that can put them in danger. Mm-hmm. I know that you mentioned that you had been getting Dana in and out of a lot of treatment programs and things like that. Do you mind sharing with us some of the challenges that your family faced while trying to find her help and trying to get her, in the right place? Because I know that treatment for adolescents is not always easy.
What I found initially to be the biggest struggle at the time was that, to them, some of them, it felt to me that because she wasn't escalated to stronger drugs, she wasn't escalated to heroin, or she wasn't into cocaine or heavier drugs, that they felt like she could wait. It was always okay, well, we'll see if there's a spot in a program next week or the week after. And it seemed like, I feel like with this crisis now, it needs to be open door. It needs to be, okay, this is what's going on now. We'll find somewhere, like an ER does. We'll find somewhere. We always had to wait. And I felt like in the time between waiting, maybe that's when something else happened. Maybe they're going to escalate to another drug. I don't think that there's enough emphasis on that. If they need help, there's no time to wait. You can't wait to see if your insurance covers it. It should be, this is what these children need, not even a rehab per se. If it was to go see her psychologist, it would be, okay, well, but we don't have an appointment for 21 days. That doesn't work. That didn't work for my Dana. It's not working.
What would you say to parents who think this can't happen to me, or my kid won't do this, or my kid won't make these choices? What can you say to those parents who think that way?
I do tell them, and I have told them, that you cannot ever say it's not going to be your child. Do not say that, because that is not right. There's 110,000 people last year who's, a good portion of those parents probably said, not my child. Don't think your child is better than anybody. It can be your child. And for many people that for a long time said it's not my child, it is their child. Unknowingly, parents don't even know. I mean, I did know what Dana was doing, but there's several parents out there now that have no idea that their children are taking pills with their buddies and are saying not my child. It can be, and unfortunately at some point it might be your child.
Yes, thank you, Debbie, for sharing that. I think that, yeah, every parent needs to be vigilant, and like you said, not to assume that their child is good, bad, somebody who there's no specific prototype of who uses substances, and so it doesn't discriminate.
And I think parents too, we talked about this in another episode, that when surveyed, 10% of parents were the ones to say that they thought maybe their kids had tried drugs within the past year. And it was 40% of teens that reported that they had. So that's a 30% discrepancy in what parents are thinking that their kids are doing and what their teens are actually doing. And I know, as someone who has been worked in recovery, has been in recovery on and off since I was a young person too. Denial is an incredibly powerful tool, and denial can not just be the person who actually has a problem and is using, but denial in families can often be very powerful, because no one wants to admit that that their child might need help. And I think a big part of what we try and do on this show is discuss the erasing of the stigma of substance abuse, of mental health, of getting help, because I think so many parents along that line of, it's not my kid wouldn't do that, that's not what we do in our home. It is not and I always stress this to people, it is not a reflection of who you are as a person, as a parent. It's not a reflection of how much you loved your children. And that, I think, is something that I always remind people that I've worked with in recovery, and myself as a parent to 2 daughters, that I cannot think that I am immune, that particularly today no one is immune to the repercussions and the impact of substance abuse. We'll be right back after this message.
Saving lives means staying informed. Knowing the dangers of using fake prescription pills can help those you care about and keep our community safe. As a parent, educator, neighbor, or friend, we all play a role in building safe and healthy futures for ourselves and our loved ones. Do your part to take the first step today. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com to access education, prevention, and treatment resources. Fake prescription pills laced with fentanyl are deadly. Be their protector. Be informed. Visit GetSmartAboutDrugs.com.
In trying to get Dana recovery, were there any things that you found that were really great resources for parents to connect with other parents going through the same thing?
As for me personally, what I could say is there was the one actual rehab that she had went to, where they actually had a parents group.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it might sound odd that it was just this little parents group, but that is what really helped me to get through. I mean, back then there wasn't as much social media help groups as there are now. There are several, which I like that it's available for people now. But myself was the one group. There were meetings with the parents, and I would go there, and I just loved going there, because it really, parents just need to find where they fit.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it be where their child is at, or maybe it is an online group for them. And
Al-Anon also is really helpful.
Yes. It helped because it makes you feel like you're not alone. Like, I knew I wasn't alone, but to sit and hear the same stories with the same parents of what their son or what their daughter did, it took a big weight off my shoulder at that time. It was, that for me, that was it. I mean, honestly, I know there are several parent groups out there. You can go through the schools, you can go through the local behavioral units for the kids, but that was for me. That was the one that really it made me feel like we're all family, I guess, per se, where this is happening. I've never seen so many parents together. That's what it was at one time. I would see another parent at the doctor's office or just visiting at the facilities, but that touched my heart, that particular group.
Absolutely. And we've talked about before that sense of community is so important in recovery, and it's often what people are looking for when they start abusing substances, is that sense of connection and that sense of community and common purpose. And it's not just for those who are actively using substances or who are in substance abuse themselves, but the families of those also need to be connected to people, also need to have that community, also need to know that they are not alone, and break down that shame and that stigma. And that isolation, because addiction and substance use thrives in isolation, shame, and loneliness. I would love to hear, Debbie, how you have been able to use this personal experience to help other families dealing with similar situations. I know it's not something that any parent wants to become, the voice of, but I think we all know that with our stories of substance abuse struggles, we can reach other people and help other people.
I do have my own son who's 12. So honestly, him and I have gone to events together to bring awareness. I do go to several, like in August there's overdose awareness. Actually, where I work, they bring recovery vans. They come to the parking lot, and I'll manage to go out and talk to people. I talk to everybody, anybody, literally. I'll talk to somebody standing in line at ShopRite, and just to make them aware of what's actually really going on. It surprises me how many people don't know. Like, there's people that really don't know the statistics and know the numbers. And I feel like if I get through to one person one day, then I've done my job that day. I also have Dana's daughters, so it's really hard to do as much as I want to do with 3 little ones.
How old are Dana's children?
9 and 6.
9 and 6.
We know one of the offshoots of kind of the opioid epidemic and the substance use kind of epidemic is that there are so many more grandparents raising their grandchildren, and it's an absolute tragedy. But what I'd say to you, Debbie, is I think you're doing an incredible job. I mean, thank you for being here today, and I think the impact of how many people you're going to reach today is going to be incredible. And so thank you for that, and stepping up and caring for her children in that way. It can't be an easy task.
Joanna, what you do as Senior Prevention Program Manager and Community Outreach, I'd love to hear what you have to say also about reaching parents who maybe think that this isn't going to happen or it's not prevalent in their community. What would you say to those parents?
One of the projects that I manage here at DEA is called our Faces of Fentanyl wall, and I actually was able to put Dana on that wall, which was very special. But it's kind of a physical display of thousands of young people, of older people. Honestly, we have every age you could think of on the wall, and it's amazing because where it is, it's like in the lobby of our headquarters where the museum is. So we get a lot of people just coming kind of to see the DEA museum. They think, oh, DEA just kicks in doors, but then they walk in, and that's the first thing they see is these pictures. And if I'm down there, and I'm down there every day, I talk to people and I kind of tell them, like, this could be your child. These are, these pictures were taken on the best day of these people's lives sometimes, and nobody wanted to die. And I think for me, it's been really eye-opening to be able to talk to parents who just come in thinking, oh, I'll go to the DEA museum, and see cool things. And then they're faced with the reality of this, which is, we talk about numbers, but these are beautiful, beautiful people. And they were leaving behind, like we said, kids a lot of times. And the pictures that we have, a lot of them are holding their kids. So I think it's been very humbling to be able to show the thousands of people kind of, not just how they died, but how they lived, and to be able to tell their stories. So for me, that's been a really powerful tool, and that's been very impactful for us at DEA.
I think one of the most important things that those of us who have either struggled with substance abuse, have lost loved ones to substance abuse, is to constantly battle the stigma that it's a personal failure, that it is a parental failure, that it is a weakness of character, that it is something that you can just make a choice and not do. I know for so many people who don't struggle with substance use themselves, the situations that you put yourself into when you are in active addiction make no sense. And if you're also struggling with mental illness, often your actions make no sense. But that does not mean that their humanity gets stripped away. And so I'm so glad that the DEA is sharing the stories and the humanity of people who've passed away from drug use. Debbie, what you are doing and sharing your story as a parent is incredible. Your strength is, I know, a strength that most parents don't ever want to know that they could have. But you are doing a beautiful and wonderful job, and you are doing an incredible thing to honor Dana. And I just thank you so much for sharing your story. I just want to give you a big hug right now, and I can't, but I'm giving you one through our call here. I just hope that parents understand and realize that any conversation that you have with your child can make a difference, whether it's a minute, whether it's 10 minutes in the car, any of it makes a difference. And that paying attention and having relationships with your child will not necessarily prevent every terrible thing from happening, but it will give you the opportunity and the chance to connect as early as possible. And I think that's the message that we want to get out to parents is, it's never too early to start having these conversations. It's never too late to start having these conversations. And they can never be too short or too long. It's constant contact. It's constant talking about it. And that also the lives of those affected by substance abuse are many and are varied and touch all walks of life and is becoming so much more prevalent. So Debbie, I really thank you so much for sharing your message today. Joanna, thank you for what the DEA does. Are there any other messages that you have for our audience, for parents, for those struggling with substance abuse that you'd like to share before we go today?
Just that if anybody feels that they suspect that their child is using, don't ignore it. Maybe if you can't do it yourself, if you don't feel comfortable confronting your child at that particular time because you're not sure, maybe even if you go through the guidance counselor or something, but you as a parent, you know your child. If you feel that, jump on that. Don't let it go, because if you're wrong, that's great that you're wrong. But if you're right, it gives you that sooner of an opportunity to jump on getting them help or recovery or whatever it is, mental health that particular child may need. Very important.
Absolutely. Debbie, Joanne, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and your story and Dana's story will have a huge impact on many people, and I know it's helping people all over the place. So thank you so much for sharing. That was such an emotional and powerful conversation. I know it's always hard, and no matter how often you have been in recovery, worked in recovery, you see this all the time. It never gets any easier to face the loss and to stand witness to the loss of what substance abuse can do. Are there any things that came to mind for you as far as what parents can do, if their children are maybe struggling with mental health? I know that adds such an extra layer on top of substance use and the difficulty in treating it.
To that point, again, we've talked about before in some of these episodes, but it bears repeating that when young people are dealing with mental health struggles, that puts them at a much higher risk for misuse of substances, especially when those mental health struggles aren't adequately kind of addressed and treated. And so that early intervention, getting your kids into, connecting with a trusted adult, whether it be a therapist, again, a coach, a guidance counselor, getting them into kind of, socialization groups or support groups from a younger age, and educating them again on the dangers of substance use and the risk that, is that they may live with, because of their mental health is so critical.
There's also so many, I think oftentimes people hear mental health and they think schizophrenia or
Mhm,
schizoaffective
mhm.
disorders or things like that. But depression, anxiety, OCD, ADHD, all of these things affect brain chemistry and send people searching searching for something to make that feel better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I really appreciate that point because, we don't have to wait till things become, a huge kind of scary challenge to manage them. And so being able to, your child is, not wanting to go to school as frequently or is having trouble getting up in the morning, is, isolating and, doesn't want to hang out with friends and different, like it doesn't have to be that, they
or a change in friend group, which was what
which
Debbie was
Debbie had
talking
pointed
about,
out,
that,
yeah.
oftentimes we see our kids go from one group to another. And
Mhm.
sometimes that can be a dangerous sign of not really forming any connections and seeking out risk-taking behavior.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think sometimes being, not sharing their thoughts, not sharing their feelings, and not seeing that they don't necessarily have the skills to articulate like what's going on for them and they're coping is also, a time to get other people involved, to talk to them, to model for them that it's okay to share our emotions and our feelings, and it's okay to find outlets, to do that.
Right. And I know, certain mental illnesses and things that affect your brain. I know ADHD, oftentimes people with that have they look for riskier situations in order to activate the dopamine in their brains, and so it becomes this risky situation. Brain gets rewarded, and we continue on with that cycle. And so parents again look at it like, oh, what are you do? These choices don't make any sense. But when you get down to some of the deeper level stuff, it is literally the brain trying to figure out how to make itself okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we want to, destigmatize mental health. We want to destigmatize substance use. These are medical conditions.
Yeah.
We should rally around people who are in need in the same way we would any other type of medical condition, and get them the support, in that same way. And I really want to reemphasize Debbie's point around, it's not just Debbie's job as a parent who's experienced this. It's not just our job as people who are advocates in the substance use field. Everyone has an opportunity to advocate for increased supports and services, for funding, to get people, help and support overall. She's absolutely right. There's not enough providers, there's not enough programs, there's not enough support. And, if folks can be involved in that in their communities,
Absolutely.
we'll all be better off. And, the things like we talked around coalition building,
Right.
and, being involved in your child's school and getting these programs into the school. These are all ways that people can help prevent these tragedies from occurring overall.
Absolutely. And as painful as this episode has been to discuss, it's here to remind us that the things we talk about on Awkward Conversations and on this show are not hypotheticals, but substance misuse does not discriminate. The danger is absolutely real, and the consequences can be sudden and devastating. And it can be just that one next time, and you never know. And so, really, I thank Debbie so much for coming on and sharing that. As a parent, I just want to give her a big hug. And so to all our parents out there, remember, keep having these awkward conversations. It's never too early. It's never too late. Start talking to your kids now. Build those relationships and bonds, and hopefully we can help support families like Dana's and stop this from happening in the future. On today's episode, we are actually going to be playing an episode from season 2 of Awkward Conversation. Timothy P. McMahon, who has been employed by the DEA since 1998. Realizing that your child needs help can be a really scary situation for a parent.
I've spoken with parents who unfortunately have lost a son or daughter to an overdose, and up to a year or more later, they're still finding hiding spots throughout the house.
I'm also, as a parent, going to be looking in your backpack. I'm going to be checking your winter coat.
One of the most important things is really, as that moment happens, taking advantage of the opportunity right then and there.
Make sure to check out getsmartaboutdrugs.com. Parents, caregivers, you can find so many resources of great information there about how to talk to your kids and make these conversations a little less awkward. A huge thank you to the Elks DAP, which is the largest all-volunteer nationwide drug awareness program, and also a huge thanks to the DEA for their outreach program and for making this possible.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Awkward Conversation series are solely those of the individuals, speakers, commentators, experts, and/or hosts involved, and do not necessarily reflect nor represent those of the production, associates, or broadcaster, or any of its employees. Production is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the series available for viewing. The primary purpose of this series is to educate and inform. This series does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This series is available for private, non-commercial use only. The production, broadcaster, or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.